Welcome to day 2. It's a slightly different tone today. Yesterday we talked a bit about technologies. Today we're talking about the sustainability side of things. So however you define net zero, we know the bottom line is reduce your emissions, increase your efficiency, do things responsibly. And if we can adopt that, and today we're going to be hearing about some consensus around standards and regulations, and as an industry, we need to agree to do something for the social good. And we need to figure out how to measure that, monitor that. So today we're going to talk a bit about that.
You know, we have these goals of getting to net zero, which really, if you stare them down and face it honestly, it's really big. And it's going to take a really big challenge in just about every sector. To me, that's why this makes this such an exciting time in history. I just get totally jazzed about the opportunities and what we have to do and the big challenge. And I'm really excited to hear this next presentation. Canada's decentralized energy industry is driving positive change and becoming more sustainable by building consensus around the use of these well thought out standards. Policymakers and businesses that value the role of standards place themselves in a stronger position to measure, manage, and assess their contributions to achieving a net zero energy future.
So it is an absolute pleasure to be here this morning with a group of visionaries and leaders and change agent, and that excites me a lot. I like to think outside of the box. My team knows this, and I like to be challenged. So I want to talk to you this morning about, there we go, a new era of sustainability. And if we as a society are declaring that we are entering into a new era of sustainability, we are choosing this era. We are choosing to change, and we are choosing and committing to leave its traces everywhere. We all know that we have less than one generation to make the changes needed. So how do we successfully usher that new era in with the very limited time frame that we have to truly make a difference? I am absolutely convinced, as the leader of SCC, but also personally and as an engineer, that standards can help us. Here's why. First, we need to have a common understanding. David, you referred to that. What's net zero, right? What sustainable means to you might be very different than what it means to me. And how we can agree on options and actions if we don't understand each other. The concept of sustainability has been discussed for many decades with differing perspectives, but many explain it as means to achieve sustainable development. And this has been around for a long time. It's more than 35 years ago that we have been talking about it. So the definition has been adopted by the International Organization for Standardization, ISO, that you might know or you might not know, but we are responsible at SCC to represent Canada at the ISO. And you can find that definition in our social responsibility standard. And it considers the sustainable development as development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. It also notes that sustainable development is about integrating the goals of a high quality of life, health, and prosperity with social justice and maintaining the Earth's capacity to support life in all its diversity. Again, I give ourselves an F on this. So as a starting point, using standards to define the terminology, or in other words, to define a common language, helps us to align our thinking and our actions. An example for your sector, decentralized energy, and thank you for the work you do. Specifically, Standards Council of Canada is helping advance a common language by supporting the development of a national technical specification with the help of CSA, which is one of our main partners in Canada. Using the same definitions when we speak on a subject, whether it's in Ottawa or at COP27 in Egypt, will allow us to create a strong foundation for unified future action. It is actually essential. an essential piece to success to have common language. And to define future action, it's imperative to have a common forum to discuss, consult, and debate those actions. Bringing together experts and interested parties to identify opportunities, challenges, and figure out the most efficient and effective path to nurture its development and adoption will be critical to its success. It allows for connection between all parts of the ecosystem that either enables or disrupts progress. Standardization can set the stage for this type of collaboration. And we're there to drive collaboration and build relationships. We're there to promote Canadian priorities and connect our stakeholders to global networks and resources, and to improve Canadian quality of life and prosperity. We do this by bringing Canada's voice to those international fora, whether it's this month's COP27, and I'm going on Friday morning, or it's our role at SCC to bring the Canadian voice to the international standardization development tables that are very important, like the International Electrotechnical Commission that you probably know very well, the IEC, but also ISO. At Standards Council, we also provide such forums for advancing specific priorities. We call these standardization collaboratives. We engage industry, government, academia, indigenous groups, civil society, and public interest to articulate the needs and jointly define the most effective solutions through the lens of standardization. As an example, we are currently working in the energy domain, your domain, with NRCan, through the Hydrogen Codes and Standards Working Group. The working group gathers close to 200 participants to tackle barriers and propose solutions in the adoption and commercialization of hydrogen technologies and infrastructure in the context of code standards and regulations. When using a common language through codes and standards, and then we use it in a common forum to discuss and collaborate on the future direction, it's possible that together we can develop a common roadmap to navigate the way there. And what's the way there for hydrogen? What's the goal of Canada? It's to advance hydrogen as a key enabler to achieve net zero emissions goals by 2050 and position Canada as a global industrial leader of clean, renewable fuels. That is the type of work that SCC with the standardization system partners facilitates through the development of standardization roadmaps. We do this for industry. We are also doing this right now for mental health and substance use services. It's fantastic. It's exciting work. SCC has also supported DEC to produce a sector-specific roadmap to help you prioritize standardization objectives and outline a path of standards and policy engagement. One aspect of the roadmap will focus on integrating sustainable development goals in Canada within the energy sector. That's exciting work. With a common roadmap in hand, it's possible to reach the desired future state by using common means and methods. And what I mean by that is it's great if you have a standard, but you also need to uptake it, use it, and be able to say, I'm meeting that standard. So conformity assessment, or otherwise called also assurance, is essential, right? It's nice to claim I'm compliant, but it's also very nice to be able to say, somebody else has checked that I am actually compliant and I'm making progress. And standardization, so standards and conformity assessment, are an essential part of getting to where we want to be in that future state, more sustainable. A country can have the most innovative technologies, but other elements are essential, as you know, to ensure both national and global success of its industry. Regulation, government policies that enable innovation, a strong, reliable supply chain, and an ecosystem that fosters business scale-up and exports. That is key to Canada's success, including investment, of course, and standardization is foundational to each of these components. Standardization supports faster access to market by providing credibility, attracting investment, and stimulating research and development. It can help de-risk new technologies, such as those in the DEC sector. Give you another example in the area of biomass. EcoStrat, it's an Ontario-based group. They worked in the extraction and use of biomass products, but they could not obtain financing for bio projects because there was no standardized way to evaluate the risk. That method did not exist. They worked with us and CSA, and we developed collectively a national standards of Canada on biomass supply chain risk. A method was created and validated to price feedstock risks and accelerate bio project financing. So issues, problems accessing market, standardization is always a solution. It enables compliance with all levels of government and also with international regulatory bodies, allowing for compatibility across global markets. Like standardization is that supports 80% of the world trade. So it's very important. So this is very important in countries like Canada, where regulatory authority is also divided across the nation. We have a beautiful dream, the federation. That concept is wonderful but in reality, not easy to implement. Standards can be used to support regulation and policy by being referenced within them and within the codes that support them. They're a lot more agile than embedding things in directly in regulation. Embedding and making reference to standards in regulation is a very agile way, and it can keep up with technological and environmental changes. And leveraging standards provides an excellent opportunity to bring in more sustainable approaches, which is top of mind at this time. Global changes in population, resource depletion, and changes in climate and ecosystem have made sustainability a focus area, which has led to the rise of interest in area and demand for corporate social responsibility, now called ESG. This has organizations scrambling to find ways to demonstrate their commitment to the environment, to society, and good governance, including using standards and financial disclosure frameworks. Those beautiful frameworks. I'll tell you more when Frederic starts asking questions. Standardization offers opportunity to address these challenges. This financial disclosure frameworks talk about the what, standardization talks about the how we get there. And international standards are broadly recognized as one of the tools to establish common ground across frameworks, because there's more than 130 disclosure frameworks, and that can be applied to ESG. Canada is the ISO Secretariat for the Technical Committee on Environmental Management. We have been since the creation of the committee in 1993. We made that recommendation to ISO that we needed some consideration. Quality was great because we lead also the Quality Technical Committee, but environmental management was essential. So we continue to lead this work. And we have positioned Canada as a leader in promoting and developing standards on environmental management to address environmental and climate change impacts, including those related to social and economic aspects in support of sustainable development. There are a lot of tools available to you. And those tools are at our disposal and brings certainly us more closer to a more sustainable future. As members of industry and government and society as a whole, I must emphasize that the value lies not in the standards themselves. There is a lot of value, but in participating within the standardization system. We need you guys at the table. We need to hear what are your issues. We need to hear what are your challenges so we can develop the right tools for you, fit for purpose. That's what we need. Standards reflect the views and the best practices of those who develop them, right? Standards are created by experts in the field and interested parties who come together to develop the best version of guidance possible. People like you. The standardization process allows for a mixture of diverse voices and lived experiences to come together. From create a common language, gathering through collaboration fora, agreeing upon a consolidated roadmap, and developing best practices, standardization is a tried and true way to collectively combine our knowledge and expertise to usher in that new era of sustainability. Everything around you here exists and is safe and is of quality because of the standardization system that has been in existence in Canada for more than 100 years, like Schneider. So this is a perfect example that standardization delivers. Please use it. We are there to help, and we have tools and solutions. So if this is the starting point of our declaration as a society to change, to transport ourselves into the future state that we desire, which is, I hope, a place where my grandkids can live. I'm not sure about that. Courage and resolve will be essential, and we will need standardization. Please get involved in the process. Thank you.
We have set ourselves yearly ESG and sustainability target for the last 15 years. We have inserted the ESG targets being externally audited for over a decade and putting that in thousands of leader incentive programs. It's not something it's nice to have. It's right in center, and you got to be keeping an eye on it. So that journey has been requiring a lot of alignment, courage, and leadership. But as well, this trust charter is important. So that's why we've been using the sustainability impact methodology. In the recent years, we've been using the science-based target initiatives to measure our progress into this. Now, the new door is open. And I think yesterday it was about technology, right? But the good news in this new era of sustainability, I would like to say, it's not anymore a technology problem. We've got the technology. We've got the technology to reduce the way we consume the energy, or being more smart in the way we consume the energy and decarbonize. So it's not a technology problem, but yet the task is big. It's, to your point, it's probably the biggest challenge of our generation.
Of course, we need to work nationally, but we are hopeful that what we are developing and the great ideas we have in Canada, we can share at the international level. And that's certainly an important role that we play. But I wanted to describe to you what we have been thinking about in the past 18 months at Standards Council in looking at the global situation, right? So you talk about climate change is the biggest challenge for us in the generation. I would say that I believe that is the biggest challenge that humanity is facing. It's for me, it's not a question of generation. It's really a question of, this is survival. But about 18 months ago, we started realizing that now a lot of investors and the financial world was starting to really pay attention to environment, social, and good governance practices. And what we were hearing when talking to various industries and organizations was there's so many financial disclosure frameworks, there's so many indicators, we're absolutely lost. You seem to have found a good path, but you know, we had those conversations, and organizations would have to report to different disclosure frameworks using different indicators, completely lost. So we really looked at that from, okay, how can we help? Because that's what we do. We try to help, again, using standards. And we realized that it was great that now there was attention paid to that, but it was the what. They were defining the what. You know, emissions, GHG, you know, inclusion, diversity, and equity. But the how was not anywhere. It was very difficult for organizations to understand the now. And that's when we realized that the bridge is actually standardization. That's what we've been producing for 100 years, and more recently, since 1993 in the environmental and social sectors is how do I put processes within my organizations to meet the targets, right? So what we have been on a journey in the past 18 months to actually try to build that bridge. And we've done it in Canada, but most importantly at the international level. As you know, right, there's a new board, International Sustainability Standardization Board, that was created by the financial and investor sectors. And we knocked on their door and said, don't reinvent the wheel, please. We are a network. So ISO is a network of 167 countries that bring thoughts, expertise to the table. We have that forum. We have been working on, like, just the technical committee that works on the environmental management has developed more than 60 standards linked to carbon footprint, climate adaptation, just name it. There's been a lot of work done. Let's not waste it. Let's use it. Because we need to build a bridge. So those that ask and want to measure the what have the tools. Those that are imposing the what, we provide the tools to those that have to answer to those questions. And that's what we're trying to do. And we've done that at the international level, but we also doing it at the Canadian level. We have created a Canadian standards advisory committee on ESG to hear about what are the challenges in Canada, so we can make sure that we have a common language, we have a common forum to discuss, and we can design a roadmap. We're going to issue a report very soon. So that's what we've been doing. And we also have been pushing, because that's part of our role, we push the envelope, ISO to say, we need guidance on net zero. There's tons of things that happen. Let's create a group. Let's have an international workshop agreement and define guidelines for net zero, so there's better clarity and it's easier to talk about action. They will be published tomorrow at COP. So we're a small country, but we have a lot of influence just because of the people we are in Canada. People listen to us, and because we are bridge builders. And that's what we have been doing from the sensation. But in order to do that, right, we need you, we need the experts, we need the interested parties to participate in those activities so that our challenges, our issues, our ideas, our successes are brought to the international level to help. If we join forces, and that's the key message, that through this idea of building bridges between the accountants, the financial sectors, and the real economy, the push has been, we need to work together, okay? I'll give you an example. Back in the days, in the 1990s, when the technical committee was created, there was a very good standards developed for measuring GHG emissions. I remember at that time, I was leading the engineering profession in Canada. I went to the accountant and I said, guys, no one profession can do this job. We need to work together. And we made it happen. We need to do the same thing now. So I think that what we can learn is certainly, I'm sure they're using standards. I know they're using standards, right? I'm sure they're working with the ecosystems and the industries, and they're making, I think that I see them as having courage. I understand that it looks like it's imposed, but I think we are at a point in time where we need to take action. And I know that a lot of businesses and organizations are taking very big actions, but it's not enough. So I think that it's a combination, right, of businesses and organizations driving change and going into the sustainability. And on the other side, it's ensuring that governments push in the same direction. And I think we have also to keep each other accountable, right?
So before I get them to speak, just to put in context the net zero challenge for Nova Scotia. Emissions are about 15% million tons a year, 2020. Not a big piece of the Canadian emission landscape, about 2%. So a very small player. Over half of that is from the electricity grid, which is about 3 gigawatts capacity. Over half of that is coal. We heard that yesterday. We're one of the coal generators in Canada. About 25% onshore wind. And that onshore wind proportion was developed rapidly based on policies that Nova Scotia government put in place to favor transition to renewables, among other things, such as the efficiency Nova Scotia I won't talk about, but one of the policies to favor transition to net zero.
So first, I'm going to start off just setting the scene a little bit in terms of Nova Scotia's current and historical energy mix, decarbonization goals, and then talk about some policies, existing and potential policies, as well as programs to further support this transition to net zero. And so, as Mike mentioned, Nova Scotia has a significant portion of its electricity mix from coal. But in 2021, the Nova Scotia government legislated new climate goals under the Environmental Goals and Climate Change Reduction Act. And so they're now aiming to have a 53% reduction by 2030 overall compared to 2005. Yeah, that number. Yeah, 2005 levels. And then reach net zero by 2050. So, and within that legislation, there is a goal to have 80% renewable electricity on the grid by 2030. We've done some modeling at the Ecology Action Center, as well as some other organizations that says we can get even further than that, and get to even 90% electricity, renewable electricity by 2030. So to get towards that 2035 goal that's set nationally. And so just to back up a little bit, in 2007, Nova Scotia government adopted a seminal environmental act, so the Environmental Goals and Sustainable Prosperity Act. At that time, the electricity mix in Nova Scotia was 87% fossil fuels, and that set a goal to get to 40% renewables by 2020. So going back to 2021, where we are now, the energy mix is actually only about 30% renewables in Nova Scotia. As Mike mentioned, that a lot of that is from wind. And we also have some hydro, but we have about 50% coal still in our energy mix. And really focusing in on electricity today, and I think some of certainly Trevor's presentation will focus on the electricity sector as well, as in addition to the direct reductions from electricity, as all of you know, that which are very important in thinking about supporting other sectors as they need to electrify. Modeling shows that in Nova Scotia, the potential for the grid will need to be 2 to 3 times the capacity it is today to support the decarbonization of all these other sectors to get us to net zero. So a lot of the reductions that have been seen so far in Nova Scotia have been due to fuel switching. I think we're at something like 26% less GHG emissions in 2018 than in 2005. So we have made some progress, but a lot of that has been due to fuel switching, getting off coal. And so a lot of that reduction has relied on the electricity sector. But one of the other factors, as David mentioned, in reducing emissions in Nova Scotia has been a really strong focus on energy efficiency for homes and businesses. So Nova Scotia has one of the first what's called electricity utilities, Efficiency Nova Scotia, that provides services, grants to all Nova Scotians to support that transition to build in further efficiency. A lot of this is around insulating homes, as well as providing heat pumps and low income, as well as free upgrades to low income households, primarily focused on insulating homes to date. And so between when its inception, about something around 10 to 15 years ago, 400,000 Nova Scotians have taken advantage of Efficiency Nova Scotia's programs in some way. And their site states that they have 1 billion tons of CO2 avoided per year thus far with their current programs. And so really thinking about expansion of these programs, particularly for low-income households in Nova Scotia, to include these switches to heat pumps can really bring in that decarbonization and bring in bring in that electrification of some of these systems that are really needed, as oil heating is also really prominent in Nova Scotia. So, and just thinking about this a little bit more, we're seeing some rising energy prices and rising energy rates in Nova Scotia, as well as elsewhere with the current climate. But if you think about someone's home, making someone's home more efficient, bills can really go down as well. So this makes energy more affordable overall, even though a rate may be getting higher. So that's one thing we've been really thinking about in trying to elevate in the conversation in Nova Scotia, because there's really legitimate concerns about energy poverty and energy affordability there. About 22% of Nova Scotians households experience energy poverty. So it's a really significant consideration as we move towards net zero in Nova Scotia. And so I also just wanted to talk about one other piece of the conversation that's been ongoing in Nova Scotia regarding a project that's called the Atlantic Loop. And so those who aren't familiar with this project, this has been a project ongoing between provincial governments of Quebec, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, and New Brunswick primarily, as well as the associated utilities, federal government. And this is a project that will bring hydro from Quebec and Newfoundland to Nova Scotia to help support our transition to net zero electricity. We're hoping to hear kind of the funding scenario for this project and whether it will go through by the end of the year. However, there's been kind of a several year process in discussing this project, how this will work, who it benefits within this framework that's being proposed, and really think that we can look at some lessons learned from this conversation around this project, and that it may really be a moment to step back and think about some of the benefits of effective transmission planning between provinces and how we can really better facilitate this trade in electricity to bring these advantages about. So at the Ecology Action Center with partners in New Brunswick, the Conservation Council of New Brunswick, we recently hosted a webinar where we had a few different speakers that were presenting on this idea of holistic network design of offshore wind in Eastern Canada, which we focused on interregional transmission planning and potential to bring the emerging offshore wind sector into the conversations. A lot of the modeling that you see around how you get to net zero electricity in particular in Atlantic Canada doesn't even consider the offshore wind sector as yet, as it hasn't been in the conversation and very much until this past year. Now you read articles in Nova Scotia about it every single morning. So so just really thinking about how we can think about that benefit in increasing trade effectively between provinces to bring reliability to the grid as we introduce more renewables, and how that offshore wind potential could really play into that, into solving some of the issues that have come up with that proposal. One of them being that Quebec is really hesitant Quebec has expressed some hesitancy to sell electricity in the really cold winter months to Nova Scotia, and there might be some in terms of being able to meet their own demands. So can think about pushing that, having some capacity from Nova Scotia to cross that boundary as well. And so just wanted to highlight two different examples from these presentations that were given. One from a professor at HEC Montreal, Pierre-Olivier Pinault, and he was really wanting to bring in the strong economic imperative for optimizing transmission in the region. And so if according to his calculations, if you kind of cut transmission between provinces that's already existing, the decarbonization of the electricity system would cost more than $35 billion. If you think about this in terms of no new transmission, we just have the transmission we have now, we figure out how to make it work, we add the renewables that are needed, that decarbonization would cost about $20 billion. But if you optimize transmission between Quebec and the Atlantic provinces, you cut that price down to $10 billion. So that's almost a quartering of that price. But I thought that was really interesting in terms of the conversations around, there's so many different economic aspects of introducing renewables and getting that transmission, upgrading lines. And so really thinking about how you can maximize your benefits in terms of economics, as well as provide a more reliable system that has more clean power on the grid and really enable us to get the right renewables to the right places where they're needed at the right time in the region. And another really interesting presentation came from the National Grid UK. energy systems operator. They're working on integrating a lot of the offshore wind that is being developed in the north of the UK into the system. And their big challenge is kind of how you get that energy on land, how you get that to the load centers that are further in the south. And what they have done in their optimization of this process, which I thought was really interesting and to bring into this conversation around how to better optimize energy in the region, is they're considering not just the economic considerations, but they are considering a balance between 4 different aspects: cost for consumers, delivery and reliability, operability of the system, impacts to the environment, and impacts for local communities. And those are all being considered equally within their decision making. So just really thinking about how those 4 aspects can be brought into the conversation when these decisions are being made in Nova Scotia and in the region, I think is really important to really strong thing that can be done. So just bringing back to the Nova Scotia context, we have this strong commitment to decarbonization, but we've been having a little bit of difficulty understanding how this is going to be delivered, particularly in the light of the recent amendments to our Utilities Act that are placing some, there's been a bit of a firestorm between our utility and the provincial government in the last few weeks. So, and so to ensure these reductions are enshrined in the way that decisions are made in Nova Scotia, something that we've been thinking about is how we may be able to do some further, maybe larger scale amendments to this act. And think about how decisions are being made by the Utility and Review Board that Nova Scotia Power is held accountable to these decisions. And so introducing a sustainability mandate and a sustainability advocate to the Utility and Review Board process is something that we think could be really strong in really enshrining these sustainable commitments, making sure that we get these renewables on the grid and are able to facilitate decarbonization. And so this would be make sure these sustainability measures are considered alongside the concerns of consumers, the concerns of industrial advocates in this process. So just to summarize, due to policies in place in Nova Scotia, emission reductions and efficiency, around emissions and reductions and efficiency, we made some progress, but we still have a ways to go to meet our 2030 and 2050 targets. And so I talked about 4 different areas where strong policy could support transitions. So really thinking about having strong measures and accountability within our climate plan. We have this great legislated target, but right now all we have is this target. So really seeing what will be laid out and really holding government accountable to this within our climate plan that's meant to come out by the end of this year. Increasing support for efficiency measures, especially those that address energy poverty, being really important in Nova Scotia. Thinking about this trade in renewables between provinces and maybe even the northeastern United States and how that can be done effectively to bring renewables onto the system in ways that are cheaper and more effective for moving that energy around. And enshrining the sustainability mandate into decisions at the provincial energy system can really bring us closer to these goals. So excited to hear about some of the innovative aspects that are coming up from my colleagues next in the panel.
So a little bit about Remote. Remote was founded in 2016 by a couple very well-respected serial entrepreneurs in our region. It started on the basis of IoT and monitoring and optimizing critical infrastructure, primarily in telecoms and broadcasting. And always had a vision to move the company towards oceans, given our backgrounds and our area and the expertise and ecosystem in our backyard and the opportunity. So about a year and a half ago, we at Remote started envisioning what that future in oceans looks like. We took about a year to get to our final mission and what we're doing in space. And our mission is to unlock the full environmental and economic benefit of marine vessel batteries. And you might think, marine vessel batteries, that's nice. How many of those are in the world? And I'll shed a little bit of light on that. The mega trends that we are taking advantage of, that everybody in this room is probably aware of, is that the electricity sector is rapidly attempting and making their way to net zero. And the transportation sector is also doing that exact same thing at the exact same time. Both of these transitions require globally trillions of dollars of batteries. And the immense pressures on supply chains and environmental requirements to get there is obvious and a challenge and a tall order. If you look at why we're interested in the intersection of those two megatrends, and it's really where Remote lives. Remote lives at the intersection of marine vessel electrification and the electrification of the electricity grids and the batteries that live in those two sectors. And if you look at the opportunity that we're talking about, the opportunity we're talking about is leveraging the batteries on marine vessels for the benefit of both the vessel operators and owners, as well as the utilities, because we believe there's a double-barreled value model that is substantially, adds a substantial amount of financial and environmental value for both those parties when done right with a lot of intelligence and a lot of software, which is where we live. And historically, those two industries don't work together. So, the fishing fleets put their solid fuels in their fishing boats. They typically don't call Nova Scotia Power unless their lights go out at their house. And that would be the relationship with utility. And so, bridging those barriers and bringing those two industries together is a big part of what we live and breathe every day. So the problems we're overcoming with our technology and with what we're doing as a company are twofold. One, we are helping vessel owners and operators and the ecosystem around the marine vessels, including naval architects, boat builders, and other supporting players, understand what it means to go electric. So, when you take a car, it's fine if your battery dies on the side of the highway. It's a little different story when you're out in the Bay of Fundy near Black Rock and picture losing power there and running out of battery power at when the waters are rushing at 12 knots and you get the third wave coming over the boat, and it's a big deal. So, battery range is a huge deal. We're helping the industry through that challenge with the data-informed models and technology to properly advise vessel owners and operators, naval architects, and boat builders on how to move to a fully electric future where battery can accomplish mission. At the same time, we're helping the grid. So if you look at utilities, historically, like I said, don't talk to the fishing community very much, and electricity grid don't. There's not an understanding of what that transition means from an electricity grid perspective. So we're helping electricity grid operators, and starting with a great working relationship we have with Nova Scotia Power in our home market to understand what does vessel electrification mean from a grid perspective. And I'll talk a little bit about what that is and what that looks like in Nova Scotia. And then we're bringing operational technology to market to bring that relationship between utilities and vessel owners to life and maximize the value of that energy storage asset that will be sitting on electric vessels. So if you look at Nova Scotia and what this means in Nova Scotia in terms of our focus area, there's 6,000 work boats in Nova Scotia. So that ranges from fishing boats to Zodiacs to rigid inflatable hulls to clam boats to fish boats that go off well offshore and fish redfish and all sorts of other every fish that you typically go in the grocery store and see on the shelves. A lot of that is a huge industry in our region. And if you look at of those 6,000 commercial boats in total, about 4,600 of those in Nova Scotia alone are commercial fishing boats, and about 3,200 of those are lobster boats. And we've started with the lobster fleet because it's a sizable fleet. We believe it's a good candidate for full electrification, and we are dead set and focused on figuring out how to electrify that fleet. So if you look at the numbers, our belief is that the lobster fleet in Nova Scotia alone can, once electrified, it could be up to 2 gigawatt hours of batteries. And so, it's about 500 megawatts of potential power capacity for the grid. That's about 25% of Nova Scotia's peak load. So it's a substantial opportunity and challenge for the electricity grid. It's about $400 million of batteries. And, once converted and assuming we get to a net zero grid by 2030, it'll save about 1.6 megatons of CO2 emissions over the life of those boats. And, if we look another step further and we talk about accelerating the transition off of coal if we can shave a year off the transition because of the technology and bringing batteries to life for vessel owners and electricity grids, we believe that that's several more megatons of potential. So, what are we doing? You might say, well, geez, that all sounds fine and dandy, but when are you going to have boats in the water, and how's this actually going to work? And yeah, right. And so, we are hard at it. We've been hard at it for about a year and a half now. We are advancing our partnerships to move this along. We're partnering with global leaders in the technology space to advance it and make sure that we are interoperable with different technologies. We are very active in policy and programming and are helping regulatory authorities and governments understand what electrification of the marine fleets mean and how they can support that transition. We're doing extensive modeling and research around this space in support of both advising policy as well as advising our technology roadmaps. And we're helping vessel owners and architects and builders navigate their transition to electric, and are active in Nova Scotia with a number of projects in that space that are at varying stages of progression. If we look at what the barriers for us in unlocking that 1.6 megatons of emissions reduction as a company and as an industry, Chantal mentioned about standardization. That is a huge part of what we do is increasingly helping understand that and advance that. Net zero target clarity, the marine sector is a little bit slower to get clarity on net zero targets, both federally and provincially. And so we see that as a barrier that needs to be solved to accelerate things faster. And funding programs like the great work NRCan is doing around on-road transportation. We want to see that move to off-road and marine, and see that as being hugely beneficial for accelerating. So it's an ecosystem effort. There's a lot of different parties that we work with on a daily basis to advance this mission, and we're doing it. And we will have our first operational projects up and running in 2023, both a retrofit, supporting a retrofit demonstration project, as well as supporting a new build ground up design lobster boat. And so we're hard at it. We are advancing it every day. And yeah, I think I'll leave it there. And that's a little bit about remote and what we're doing to help Nova Scotia go net zero.
So a little bit of background and story on this. I sold my last company in 2016, and I sort of wanted to do a transition after that into a climate related field. And we did a bunch of research, and we ended up founding this company, Planetary, and it was an ocean technology. And I'm based here in Ottawa. We're short on ocean. We don't have a lot of them here. We need a couple more in order to do the research we're doing. And I ended up running into Mike at the Globe conference out in Vancouver. And Mike at the time was at Innovacorp, and he was, attracting businesses to Nova Scotia. And he didn't say to me, "Hey, Mike, you should move to Nova Scotia. This is the right thing to do." He was actually a lot sneakier than that. And I'm getting both mics here. And he actually said, "Hey, Mike, why don't you meet this researcher at Dalhousie? And why don't you meet this person at the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency?" And before I knew it, I was running a Nova Scotia company. And it was sort of like just this insidious thing. And it's been actually fantastic. So in Nova Scotia, we have some just incredible supports for entrepreneurs and for businesses across the board. But almost more importantly for me, we have this incredible base of talent around the oceans and around ocean technologies. We have, and I don't think people know this, we don't talk about this very often, but in Nova Scotia, we have some of the best ocean chemists in the world working out at Dalhousie University. People who've been attracted by Canada's R&D and research funding programs in order to work on ocean chemistry. And we actually got news this morning from COP, which is really exciting, that in the Article 6, which is the sort of program that allows us to trade carbon credits around the world, the recommendation is to include the ocean reservoir in tradable credits for permanent carbon removals around the world. And so that's a hugely exciting development that we just heard about today that's going into this international carbon trading programs to get us to net zero. So let me step back and talk about why that is so important and why that's so critical. The oceans are the largest store of carbon on the Earth's surface. Now, we live on land, right? So we don't really think about the oceans very much when we're thinking about carbon and all of the things we need to do to solve the climate crisis. But because 88% of our carbon is in the ocean, this is the most powerful thing that we can use to get ourselves towards that net zero goal and that net zero outcome. And that's both in terms of reductions as well as in terms of removals. When I talk about carbon in the oceans, I'm actually talking about the carbon that's dissolved in ocean chemistry. So we're not talking about blue carbon or mangroves or anything like that. Those are actually a vanishingly small portion of the carbon in our oceans. What I'm talking about is actually this carbon that is dissolved as bicarbonates and carbonates in seawater. When you think about the oceans, they also are a really important buffer for the carbon that we have in our atmosphere. So the oceans and the atmosphere are always in balance when it comes to the carbon. They're like mirrors of each other. If we increase the amount of carbon in the atmosphere, and we've been doing a little bit of that recently, we actually get more carbon dissolved into our oceans. And that has some really negative effects. So as we, actually CO2 is actually an acid. So as it dissolves into our oceans, it actually acidifies the ocean. And it creates some really negative effects for all of the life in the ocean, especially things that make shells. So things like corals and things like that are degraded by this thing called ocean acidification. And all ocean acidification is, it's too much CO2 in our ocean. So what our technology does and what we've been working on with these great researchers at Dalhousie is to very simply take an antacid, just like what you would get off the shelf or Rolaids or something like that, and add it into seawater. And as we add that Rolaids into seawater, it neutralizes that acidic CO2 and converts it into bicarbonate and adds it to that massive pool of carbon within the ocean. And so that bicarbonate dissolved in ocean chemistry has this really neat feature that it's actually stable in ocean chemistry for about 100,000 years. So we have this really long duration permanent store of carbon with this added benefit that what we're doing is we're restoring ocean chemistry. We're making the oceans more hospitable to the life that evolved in it. So we're bringing it back into pH balance where it's supposed to be. So this is an absolutely massive thing that we're trying to do. The oceans are huge. To give you a sense of scale, if we were to add sort of 37 billion tons of this antacid into seawater all at once, that would be the absolute minimum that we could add in order to even detect it on the most sensitive equipment we have. So the oceans have this huge scale advantage to adding carbon to them and this ability to use them for net zero and decarbonization. And that's pretty important because when we look at the IPCC reports and the scale of what is required in order to actually get us to net zero across the board and to keep us below 2 degrees and even have a chance at 1.5, we need to, as Michael said, be removing gigatons of carbon from the air on top of getting ourselves to net zero every year starting in 2050. A sense of scale on that is the amount of carbon that we need to remove once we're at net zero. So this is legacy carbon that's removed directly from the air by 2050 is roughly 2 to 3 times the volume that the current oil industry produces. So just sink that in. We need an industry in the next 28 years that processes 2 to 3 times the volume of the current oil industry, and we have to build that in 28 years. So just an absolutely massive approach. And the oceans, I think, is one of the very few places that we can actually achieve that kind of scale with actual positive benefits to the ecosystems around us. So that's essentially what we do. In order to produce all of this antacid, our system also produces hydrogen as a byproduct and battery metals as a byproduct. So we essentially take mine tailings, which are a waste product, and we process those with electrochemistry to produce our antacid, and then take our antacid out to the ocean. And so this is sort of what Planetary is doing, and our goal is for our technology to remove a gigaton of carbon from the air every year starting in 2045. So that's where we're moving towards. This is all based in Nova Scotia, like I said, and I think a big component of what we can do in Canada is that while we have, you know, sort of 700 some odd million tons of emissions across the country, one of the big advantages I think we have is we have all of this innovation, all of this research, all of this knowledge that can help the rest of the world also get to their net zero goals. And I think that's got to be a big component of what we do as Canada in terms of the global climate fight. So thanks very much.
Yeah, so there is an ongoing conversation. As I mentioned, you see new pieces of this conversation coming up in the news almost daily. I think there's interest from 5 large developers to export hydrogen from Nova Scotia, primarily using offshore wind. And so we're really trying to kind of that there's a lot of steps in terms of technology, in terms of economic opportunities to get to export of hydrogen to Europe. You can't export it directly as hydrogen, it has to go as ammonia. There's kind of losses and other processes that have to, a lot of things have to line up in that process. And so we're just really trying to think about the benefits and the kind of costs to bringing in those large industries to Nova Scotia. So we really try and think about the community.
Yeah, we're thinking a lot about the communities that will be kind of next to the offshore wind developments and the electrolyzer and plants that will be producing that offshore wind. And think about, as you mentioned, there's this history of oil and gas offshore in Nova Scotia, as well as history in mining. There hasn't been a lot of royalties that have come back to Nova Scotia in those export capacities. So really thinking about whether that export is kind of is a really good path forward in Nova Scotia, and also thinking about then if we have these opportunities to be developing this offshore wind technology, whether some of that can come back into the grid and whether the benefits to Nova Scotia and to the Nova Scotia grid needs can be considered within that market. So just trying to balance those different things, and I think there's different people that are playing in that space, and certain things are that export capacity I think will happen. But just trying to kind of bring the conversation into the different opportunities that there may be in Eastern Canada to strengthen our own domestic markets as well. Is something we're trying to bring into the conversation.
So I think there's probably 2 in what we do. First of all, our process, as I said, produces hydrogen at mine sites. And so it's a sort of a decentralized energy storage fuel production from local renewable energy sources is sort of how the technology works to produce our antacid. So you get this hydrogen produced at a mine site to decarbonize that, and it can be used locally. So sort of I would say a decentralized energy storage and source. But I think the bigger thing is when you think about net zero, the net in net zero is really important. And so when we look at all different energy mixes across the country or across various different systems, there's going to be a certain amount of energy that is very difficult to decarbonize. Whether that is, a very remote site that needs a fossil fuel really to produce reliable energy in a decentralized way or whatever that is, and that netting out of those emissions. The nice thing about carbon removal is that it is decentralized. It can happen anywhere. If I remove carbon from the air in Nova Scotia, I could net out an emission that happened in Iqaluit, right? And so that location independence, which is proving out through things like how the California Air Resources Board looks at DAC and things like that, is a really interesting way of thinking about a total net zero energy mix, whether that energy mix is centralized, decentralized, or whatever the case may be.
We're a little bit concerned about as I mentioned, we have this legislated act that is our climate act, but the plan has not come forward in terms of how this will be delivered. And within, kind of the line items that were put out in the act, efficiency is not really playing a strong role within what we've seen from the legislation. So we're really pushing to make sure that efficiency piece has strong build out in the actual delivered climate plan.
So that's something that we think is really important, that that efficiency piece is kind of more expanded upon, and we see how that's going to play out and will be important to build in.
If you don't know about the Pathways Alliance, we're comprised of Canada's oil sands, the largest oil sands company. So there's just literally a handful of us, but we make up 95% of oil sands production. So when you come together with that critical mass, you can do some hopefully good things. What we've done is we've come together and we're working with government, so at the provincial and federal level, to come up not just with a goal or a vision, because those are laudable, but not enough given the challenges that we face. So what I'm most pleased about is a very pragmatic and actionable, specific plan with clear goals, clear milestones to support Canada's 2030 Paris commitments and the 2050 net zero goal, which we all share. Now, in terms of pathways to net zero, and I use the word, it's a bit of a pun, but it's obviously very important. There are many, many pathways. And we've seen that this morning with the session. Many of you are involved in organizations and companies that are developing your own pathways. In terms of what we're looking at, because of the horizon of 2030, which is encroaching incredibly quickly, we're very, very focused now on existing technology like CCUS. You probably read about investment tax credits and other types of things, but we're also many of our companies like Suncorp, for example, we're Canada's largest user and producer of hydrogen. We do it in our refineries. It's not a new energy, right? But what is new is the opportunity to combine it with CCUS, the opportunity to see what we can do in transportation, lots of, decentralized energy opportunities. We're also going to be looking at, in terms of our plan, other technologies in terms of direct air capture, as well as others like small modular nuclear, which are further along in development, but which will be important as well. So I just want to say, again, I could go on and on. If you're interested, send me a note or chat with me at the lunch. I could go on and on about pathways. Very, very excited to be doing this work. Very, very excited, as the introduction noted, to be supporting, more importantly, the work that each of you are doing, whether you're an entrepreneur or part of the incredibly essential ecosystem to support that work. So thank you.
Okay, just in case you didn't hear me, my name is Raed Arab. I'm the founder and CEO of Maxun Solar. Maxun is a game changer for the distributed solar generation market, with a mission to decarbonize heat and power in buildings with a clear path to profitability. So the environmental problem is the fact that buildings, commercial and residential, they contribute 30%, and in the industrial buildings, they contribute another 30%. That's over 60% of all emissions. That's a massive amount of emissions. The technical problem is dual axis tracking is a good thing. It generates double the output of fixed tracking. As you see, the fonts on this presentation got kind of a little bit mingled, and you're probably gonna have, this is gonna happen in other slides. So, but the problem is dual axis tracking is only on the ground, and they are massive in size, they are vertical, they cannot be installed on buildings. So inspired by the sunflower, we developed the first horizontal, low profile, dual axis tracking system for buildings with a deep 60-degree angle in every direction and a modular, easy to install and maintain form. This demonstration installation was done 2 years ago and has weathered through the tornado that came through Ottawa this summer. Predicated on this technology, we have two product lines, electrical and simultaneous cogeneration, PV and thermal at the same time. The electric-only system delivers a minimum of 1.5 times more energy compared to fixed tilt installations, while the simultaneous cogeneration system produces 3.5 times more combined energy. Efficiency that is much needed where space is limited, and that is the building rooftop. Our mission is to become the preferred choice for the flat rooftop solar market. We have an advantage. We have an advantage in snowy locations, as we knock off snow, and we're not prone to by tilting, and we are not prone to snow accumulations due to the high elevated platform. The iPyramid 1P is our first product, is a turnkey photovoltaic only system with up to 2 times more energy compared to standard tilt, with 30% lower kilowatt hour cost. It utilizes standard PV, yet it's integrated with our own shade mitigation technology on the panel side. And that will basically maximize the space utilization and the output. We are taking orders for this product now. So when it comes to competition in the dual axis tracking, all dual axis tracking is available for the ground. So on the on the flat rooftop, that's non-existent. Therefore, our competition is not actually a brand name, it's more of an installation style. The most common installation style is the 10-degree fixed tilt on rooftops, and we use that as a base in our comparison. For Ottawa, we generates 80% more energy with 27% extra cost and capital cost, but that translates into about 30% lower kilowatt hour cost. So our holy grail product is the iPyramid 1C, which is the cogeneration. So this is in the pilot stage. The iPyramid 1C is a simultaneous solar cogeneration with photovoltaic and thermal, and that captures 3.5 times more energy, combined energy compared to the fixed tilt. This technology utilizes cells that are used on satellites. They are over 40% efficient, and we concentrate the light on them 1,000 times. So with that, we can capture 35% electricity and 50% thermal. We have one pending patent, which we want to take internationally, and we have plans for additional patents as well to cover the shade mitigation and ground mount solution. Gonna give me a minute or two for the clicking. We have a seasoned team led by myself. I have over 15 years experience in the solar business and 25 years of general business experience, and I have multiple startups in the past and a solar construction company. Dr. Bruno Rocha, he's our company CTO, and he brings in multiple many years of experience in R&D and product development. My son Abdullah Arab, he's the one that makes it happen for us. So he's the computer and the manufacturing side of things. So we have an esteemed panel of advisors. They're very active, and a support team of consultants as well. Where are we in? So we have tremendous traction. So we have our first order from Environment Canada for a 10 kilowatt, small 10 kilowatt system. But what is important here is our deal relationship with Enbridge. So we have our first, almost I call it a 1 megawatt order to be installed here in Ottawa at Algonquin College with the LCEF program. So that's 1 megawatt that is in line with our sales plan for the 10x sales plan, which is going to come up in the next slides. So we have LOIs for about 8.4 megawatt, which is about 14 buildings here in Ottawa. And again, we'll go over that. So we also have awards and recognitions and grants that we received. So the market is $64 billion. That's the total addressable market. And we want to just focus on about a $2 billion chunk for us, which is once we reach the 1,000 megawatt target. And that's about a $2 billion. So our business model is simple. We want to be the R&D, the manufacturing, and the marketing of this brand. So our model is a wholesale model, but we're going to target, basically, we're going to have a worldwide network of distributors and installers worldwide. And they're going to cater to basically the MUSH, the commercial, the residential, and the industrial markets. So this slide is gonna kind of mingle, but it shows our 10x sales plan, basically starting with 1 megawatt, 10 megawatt, 100 megawatt, and then reach to the 1,000 megawatt. We can easily reach 5,000 megawatts. 1,000 megawatts is only 2,000 buildings. So 2,000 buildings worldwide. So that's a very achievable target. Just gonna quickly. So our revenue model is basically wholesale. but it's going to start first. We're going to do the heavy lifting. Our exit strategy is an M&A exit strategy and possible IPO upon reaching the 1,000 megawatt. We are raising $2.8 million in equity and or convertible note to basically help us with certifying the iPyramid 1P, delivering our 1 megawatt sale, and closing the next 10 megawatt. Thank you.
Thank you. While you get your mic up, I'll ask. Good job. What is your current post or pre-money valuation?
That's a question. It's in the eye of the beholder. So we are asking for a $28 million valuation.
Okay. $28 million.
2.8 on a $28 million.
Okay. And IP. Who owns the IP?
We own the IP directly.
Okay, great. Mike.
On the R&D phase, I see you have like efficiency of like 35% for the electrical and then 50% for the thermal.
Yes.
What are your competitors doing? And then do you have any opportunities to improve? Are you looking to improve those efficiencies?
Absolutely. So on the cogeneration system, we use concentrated lenses. Okay, it's a CPV technology. So that utilizes, like I said, 40 to 42 right now CPV cells that are used on satellites. We get them from third party. They're not ours, but we are like the laptop compared to somebody supplying you the CPU. So without our system, these you cannot utilize these. So we concentrate the light on them 1,000 times. If they improve, they have a path to reaching 50%. So this is what it's triple junction cells, and there is quad and fifth junction cells. Okay. Did I answer your question? And we captured 50% thermal from the bottom of the cell. So we can generate 100-degree temperature in minus 10 degrees with 1,100 concentration of the light in the middle of the winter. So.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Unico power. Yeah, condo owners need to charge at home. All right, so there we go. So the size of the market for EVs in Canada, most people think there's not many. 3% in the first half of 21, and then 6% in the first half of 22, which seems low, but it's doubling. The reality is, though, it's very isolated by market. So Vancouver is actually 12% in the first half of 21. What we're seeing is every market's following the same trend. So these things are really growing in Canada, not just in the world. And there's 52 million apartment units across North America that are in our markets. And unlike Mark, we're not afraid of condo boards. We like working with them. No, nobody likes working with the condo boards. But this is a very, very large market. So we're seeing about 26% average growth over the next 10 years in North America. And we're only focused in North America. So the challenge with condos is North Americans don't like to share. We're just not good at sharing. Europe's better. China's better. We're not good. But in condos, there's no choice. You're all in it together. You're part of the board, and you got to share. So that's an advantage and an opportunity for us because behind the meter, we have a completely deregulated microgrid. And so there's a real opportunity that presents. The first thing, though, is because it's shared power, everybody in the building's paying for it, but only a few people are driving EVs. So somehow you got to track what's the power and the electricity the EV owners are using, and you got to bill them, you got to collect it. The second thing that leads to is that there's limited capacity in that building. It was never designed for all these electric vehicles to charge at full power all at once. So you need a system to address both those problems or opportunities, as I like to look at them. And there's a lot of products out there that do. But the biggest problem is power. And we heard from Arcus yesterday that they're doing this for industrial and larger customers. This peak power is the big issue with electric vehicles because one electric vehicle can use as much power, kilowatts, not kilowatt hours, but kilowatts, as 2 3-bedroom houses. So if you start multiplying that out and you say a lot of houses have 2 cars, like we're talking a lot of power if you don't control this. That's the real challenge with condos and charging. And so what we do, what our unique value is that we manage EV charging as part of the building, not as a standalone EV network. So we integrate that with what else is going on in the building. So on the left of this slide, you'll see that this is on the left is the cloud-based server. that manages billing, tracking usage, that sort of stuff. That's a standard EV charging solution. That's the one you're going to see. On the right, though, is what's unique about us. We put an energy management system in the building. And we don't just manage the electric vehicles. We combine that by monitoring what's going on in the building. And because of that, we're able to share power with things like air conditioning. So when the air conditioning is on, turn the cars down. We don't have to guess. There's no prediction. We're actually seeing it in real time. That's quite different. So we sell the hardware. That's what people like to pay, but our IP is really the software behind it in the system. We put a cabinet in an electric room. We sell the chargers. That's, as I say, people like paying for chargers, even though the real value is in the power management. And then on the right is our gateway controller. We don't use Wi-Fi. We use long-range radio. And we're the only EV charging provider, solution provider. Actually, there is one more, but I'll talk about that in a minute. That uses long-range radio. And the reason we do that is IoT uses LoRa. So there's all kinds of devices out there that are already made to work with LoRa. So as that market develops, we'll be able to integrate that into the store, into the building. We have 4 revenue streams. There are initial hardware sales. And with that, there's initial customers that start activating their charging. Then there's future recurring hardware sales. So some of our recurring revenue is once we're in a building, every owner in that building that buys an electric vehicle has to use our charger. So we continue to sell through the 5, 10, 15 years of that building. We continue sales. But the future recurring revenue is the real value. And that's where the EMS comes into it. So no condo is going to buy an EMS. They just don't care and they don't want it, but they all want to buy EV charging. So we're selling them the EMS, or we're selling it as EV charging. So as these EMS features start to come out, we're already in the building, we're selling them. And so I'm going to talk about carbon credit in a minute, but there's a lot of future value revenue streams that really don't have to do with that monthly subscription fee. This is what the market looks like. It's really broken into smart charging companies, and that's what people think of when they think of EV charging. These are the flows, the charge points, the hypercharges. And really all those should be right on top of each other because they're all exactly the same. And then you've got the energy management, building energy management companies. And I know David hadn't heard of Schneider, but most people had. So, and we've got some new entrants that aren't doing anything with EV charging. And then we've got some mature, high quality building management solution providers. And Schneider's by far the best. And I'm not just saying that because one of the judges from Schneider. I made this chart last week, but Schneider actually is starting to use LoRa. So we, and if they work really hard, someday they may catch up to us. This is what our team looks like. The guy on the left, the guy in the middle is the guy that actually put it all together. Just a brilliant mind. And we've been working on this together for 4 years. But on the right is new. And SEMA came in this year, and SEMA is going to exploit that 4th value stream. And the first thing that SEMA did was she put together a carbon credit program in 2 months that's implemented. We're qualified in BC. We're registered. We have half our customers are on board. And we're actually going to make 4 times the revenue in 2022, recurring revenue from carbon credits as we are from EV charging subscriptions. And at some point, we're probably just going to eliminate EV charging subscriptions because nobody likes them. So that's what SEMA is going to do. We have 70 buildings now with our EMS in it. We started out in Vancouver. We're in 7 cities in Western Canada. We're going to be in Toronto, probably in November will be a first building. And in those buildings, we have 14,000 parking spaces. So as the EVs start to get adopted, those are already sold. Anybody buys an EV in those buildings, they come in. So if you pick 20% of that, that's what we already have as recurring revenue. We're actually revenue positive. We've been growing at 100% for the past 3 years. Last year, we did $1 million in revenue, and we actually had $250,000 of net income, not EBITDA, net income. And we're going to do $2 million this year. Going forward, we're raising money now. We're going to accelerate next year. We need to get into the US. The reason we need to raise money is we need to go faster. Organic is great, but we need to go faster, and we need some money to help us scale. We're raising $3 million. And really what we're looking for is partners that have experience scaling into the US. That's what we really need. This is be hard, especially with hardware. And we're going to go into 12 new markets in the next 18 months. Thank you so much, DEC, for putting this on and for inviting me here.
Scaling into the US, such a nebulous term. talk to me about what that means.
Well, so comes Don.
Yeah.
There's 42 markets in North America. Canada's pretty easy. We're moving. They're very similar. The tariffs really define what you have to do in a market. But the other thing is we got to Vancouver at the perfect time. Nobody was there. They were a distant third in Canada. Now they're first in North America for adoption. And so going to the right market is so important first. We don't know what that market is, first of all. So we need to do some research and say, don't just pick California. It's probably the worst place to go. Atlanta might be better. So we need to do that. And then when we go to Atlanta, it's like, okay, how do we get in there? It's a hardware deployment. We need to support this stuff. There's a lot of things we need to understand. And then of course, there's the corporate structure side of it. So we want to pick the sequence of where we go. We want to say, how do we need to set up to do business in the US properly so that we can do massive scale there, not just toying with it. That's kind of what I was talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. So for those of you who were grabbing a second Caesar earlier, my name is Anders Cruz. I am the Chief Financial Officer of Solar Earth Technologies. We're based in Vancouver, although we're active in America, Canada, Europe, the Emirates, and China. We build the world's toughest solar panels. Imagine solar Earth everywhere you've never thought of putting solar panels before. It's a new form of solar power, a rock-hard surface that does not break. Sidewalks, parking lots, roadways, and all docks all become climate-friendly power-generating surfaces. We transform everyday infrastructure into solarized power-generating buildings and surfaces. We don't see ourselves as competing with traditional solar. If you've taken care of your roof, if you've done your industrial commercial farm out on a piece of greenfield, that's great. We're going to do solar everywhere else. We're adding it to infrastructure with a proprietary encapsulation layer and traction layer so you can embed it anywhere and everywhere where you have infrastructure and hard flat surfaces. We're about 85% as efficient as traditional solar, but it's immediate green energy. And in markets where your rate of power, where power costs are around 15 to 20 cents kilowatt hour, you're seeing a 5 to 10 year payback. This is an illustration of our installation in Tampa, Florida. We put in a solar earth powered sidewalk that powers a hurricane resistant traffic intersection. And of course, Tampa just got hit with a pretty big hurricane. 70% of their traffic intersections went down because you can't bury anything in the ground in Florida. So they're all using overhead power lines. Ours was active all the way through. Power diminished a little bit when it was covered by a few feet of water, but generation continued, the battery pack continued powering it. And so this helped evacuate the city safely and responsibly. Tampa is extremely happy. They're looking at more installations and they're going to bring us out to all kinds of other hurricane vulnerable cities. Our panels are tough and they're ready to go. I brought one. We can do different surfaces on the background, black, white, or transparent, depending upon the use and the need. They're about 24 inches by 24 inches or just 570 by 570, as you can see. They're so tough, you can do light vehicle traffic on them. They can carry 5 tons worth of weight. How do we build them? We do a proprietary encapsulation layer, which you can barely see, but it's fiberglass and proprietary polymers that then are laminated around traditional solar cells. And then we put on our proprietary traction layer, which is actually the trickiest part of the technology, is getting some grit to an otherwise smooth surface, grit that can last for the 5 to 10 to 15 years of maintenance and support. 1 mile of our sidewalk in California would power 1.2 million electric vehicle miles or 36 homes annually. So there's huge opportunity to take existing hardscape surfaces and solarize them. Imagine putting solar power everywhere you've never thought of before. At home, you put it in the driveway or on the walkway. And e-mobility stations right around the charging station. And aviation and transport hubs. We're talking to airports in China where they're going to do all of those places where those big nasty buses that you don't want to get on. Well, at least we can charge some power from where they're located. We're working with our partners at Shift Energy for ports at Rotterdam and Taiwan and around the world, where they're going to electrify their battery solutions for electric shipping. In cityscapes, we've already talked about. Remote places, we're working with telco providers in Africa to give them resilient, theft and vandalism-proof solar, because you can't really steal it once it's put into a paver. In industry, and of course in microgrids everywhere. We have installations around the world, notably in China and Canada in particular, and in South Africa, where we have an active sales energy as well, at eco resorts, solar sidewalks and cam loops, and
Thompson Rivers University Plaza, at a test village in China, and at bike stations in Vancouver. We're at the convergence of two mega trends, the upgrading globally of infrastructure and solarization of as much power locations as we can. Infrastructure is accelerating. Solar power is expected to be in the trillions. We're focusing on particular addressable verticals in those markets: e-mobility, rural electrification, telco towers, marine port electrification, and net zero construction, all of them billion-dollar plus markets. In the competitive landscape, we've got a couple of competitors actually out of Europe, the ones in yellow, as you can see. Pladio uses a tempered glass surface, which has traction issues. Wattways is a French consortium that have had a lot of issues with their traction surface. We're 2 to 3 times cheaper than they are on a delivered cost per kilowatt hour. We actually compare favorably if you take traditional solar PV costs and add that to the cost of a concrete paver. Normally, you'd have to install them separately. If you put them together, you end up at the same cost price as ours and only using one piece of hardscape. Skipped over the global patent portfolio, which we have, especially in China and in North America with global jurisdictions. Our team is headed by Douglas Matthews, who's an Australian, South African, Canadian, so he's pretty adept at managing our global depth. Douglas is a serial entrepreneur who's launched a number of commercial companies. Brian Johnson was employee number 2. He's an accomplished patent attorney and focuses on our IP protection and development. I myself have worked in banking, renewable power, and real estate financing for most of my multiple decades in service. Meng Wang is our founder and accomplished entrepreneur and deeply versed in semiconductor technology. And Dr. Michael Whitwick leads up our research and development. We've got a number of recent wins and partnerships as we go from a research and development phase into a full commercialization stand-up, building renewable energy microgrids in the US, down in Kansas. We have a contract with the city of Lytton to help solarize their sidewalks. We have an exclusive contract with BASF after multiple years of joint development of our proprietary traction layer. In Tanji, China, we're looking at helping them with electrifying a rural village. In Malahat First Nation wants to use this for an end-of-run situation where they're otherwise looking at an expensive substation. In Rotterdam, we're working with Shift to provide the power for their hot swappable marine batteries. And then with Shift Clean Energy, we're going to expand that entire port initiative. I'm the CFO, so you're going to get lots of numbers now. Sorry, I held off. Projected contracts for the next months through the end of 2023 total up to 11 million, my apologies. These are contracts with more than 40% likelihood of closure. And our gross margins are coming primarily from sales margins, but some from production margins and manufacturing, and some from royalties as we step up a licensing program. Our first full-scale commercial plant begins next month in Chongqing, China. With lots of licensees looking for more. And our current round, because I know you want to know, we're raising $3 million in this current round. I have 600,000 left. We've already had 2.4 million spoken for. You can see our pre-money at 10, post-money at 3.5. Sometime in the middle of 2023, we'll probably do a Series A, and you can see the valuation points there. Thank you very much. Well, snow doesn't work well on any solar panel. So ours is the same as any other. You just brush it off.
Oh, okay.
Or any other standard maintenance. In fact, ours is a little tougher. And the Thompson Rivers installation has been around for 7 years now, and they use standard. I mean, you can't use a snow plow on it, but the industrial brushes and so on, that all helps take the snow off. We're not really looking primarily at snow markets. Our top markets are places like South Africa and China, where snow cover really isn't a big issue. Get any product off the ground, you're going to have to go out and knock on doors yourself. We don't want to build out a global sales force of hundreds and thousands. So we're very pleased that at this stage, we're already starting to find adoption, in particular from EPC providers. We have an ongoing relationship with the largest EPC in the Emirates, and they're already looking at multiple thousands of product panels to take on board. So we kind of see it as building an active training and licensing program for installers and even larger EPC installers out there in the system. And then our ultimate goal is to sit back and manufacture the panels, improve that system, and even license out some of the manufacturing to franchisees.
Hi, I'm Jonathan. I'm the CEO at Moduly. As you already know, the energy market is facing major challenges: the growing demand, intermittent consumption, and also the global warming effect. All these problems create huge opportunities. The opportunities to reduce our CO2 emission production, our peak demand problem, and also a lack of energy control. To resolve this type of problem, we need to start by optimizing our own energy efficiency. And how we can do this? By managing our peak load, centralizing our energy, and by increasing user collaboration. Moduly is a smart energy solution behind the meter with the integration of 4 major components: energy battery storage, mobile application, including IoT control, an energy adapter, and also our smart interface. But let's make a deep dive into Moduly. The slide is not the right one, by the way. It's crap right now. So yeah, anyway, here is our home kit, a smart energy solution and plug and play technology. No electrician, no permits or extra cost is needed. It's like plugging your smart TV in your wall outlet. That can be done in less than 5 minutes. We are fully customizable and scalable from 2.5 kilowatt hours for low income, small apartment, condo, or houses, and we can scale it up to 12.5 kilowatt hours for big mansion, light commercial, institutional, and more. Basically, Moduly will push back energy through your wall outlet to slow down your energy consumption. You can recharge Moduly with your home grid, your solar production, off-peak, or when your rate is low too. You can also use Moduly as an energy backup in case of power outages. Combined with our mobile application, now you can centralize all your energy. What that means, all your energy production, your energy consumption, and your energy storage. We use artificial intelligence to learn through the customer habits. We optimize the environment, predict, automate, and simplify their daily life. But at the same time, we optimize all smart devices such as thermostat, electric vehicle chargers, and solar. When we combine both together, we can help any type of residential and commercial users to reduce their energy consumption, peak demand, carbon footprint, and also provide an energy backup in case of power outages. If you use Moduly strategy, you can at least reduce 12% of your electricity bills, 850 pounds of CO2 a year and more. And also every time you reach your peak demand, you can shift 1.6 minimum per peak per day. If you are power utilities, commercial, REITs company, you can use our Moduly interface. That's another good slide, but it's good. And now what you can do is connect with the user using Moduly. So now you will be able to control remotely that group of users and collaborate with them. You will be also able to control and monitor their solar, EVs, grid demand, and smart appliances, create your own peak shaving and demand response program. And at the end, increase your profitability and reduce your CO2 emission production. When we combine the solution for home or residential and commercial use with the platform, now we can turn any type of houses into a virtual power plant. Since Techstars, a few months ago, we raised $1.5 million. From there, we started building a strong relationship with power utilities across North America, including in Spain. And also, we built strong relationship in the residential industry with solar installer, distributor, and REITs company. We reached quickly in less than 8 months, $1 million in revenue. And right now we expect to close that year with over 2.5 million in revenue. Our business model is really simple. We create a product for residential and commercial use, and we have 3 ways to reach our customer. We can sell directly to our customer online if we want, but our best guess right now is working with partners like solar installer, distributors, and others, and also working directly with power utilities. Our pricing model is a combination between monthly fees and direct sales. A user can get started with $1 per watt hours, or as a service, we start at $3 per user per month. We currently have 40% of gross margin, expect to increase this by the end of the year to past 50%. The smart energy market growing pretty fast right now will reach over $253 billion by the end of 2027. And Moduly working across market right now, including energy storage, energy efficiency, and the energy distribution, and with a TAM of over $5 billion. We are not alone in that market, but Moduly is the first one providing a 906 smart energy storage and platform combined together that can centralize all energy activities. And after that, we can also learn through the customer habits. We customize everything from any type of customer to reach any type of budget, goals, and type of environment a customer may have. Our team accumulates more than 50 years expertise in that field. I'm Jonathan, CEO with over 18 years expertise in business. I've launched several startup in the past, make an exit, also commercialized more than 12 different types of technology across North America. Mario, our COO, have over 20 years expertise in manufacturing, supply chain, and also operation. And Alvaro, our CTO, have over 10 years expertise on energy management strategy and energy storage. We are also pretty well supported internationally through different organizations. We're currently running our seed round right now, and we start around at 5 million. And we already have over 50% committed for that round. We expect to finalize this by the end of December, and we'll use that money to accelerate our go-to-market strategy and build a strong team. Thank you so much for listening to me and join our Moduly community. We expect to turn 10 million with the current pipeline we have. All client we have, for example, Georgia Power, we have a project with them. Now we deployed around 200 users. If everything go well, they can deploy around 10,000 users. So they represent 20 million in revenue.
Okay.
We have a progressive AI, so we learn through event, but also we predict, for example, the weather change. So if a storm coming, power outages is coming, we can predict that and give that to the customers. And also the purpose of that is also to automate the process for customers and utilities at the same time. We own everything. We already have mega patent deposit in it. Everything is designed in Montreal in the United States because we have a team in US and Canada, but we are a Canadian corporation. And the product is I would say the hardware is assembled in China right now, where my other co-founder, Mario, is based since 12 years. So.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Excellent. Okay.